Hello everyone, my name is Terry Thomas and this is my PowerPoint presentation for my project and it is called Racial Shock. For my topic, or goals and concepts, I had to research one television show or movie from the past with minorities as the main character that were once thought as being progressive. I had to explain why it was considered innovative at that time as well. I had to consider, is it still considered progressive? Why or why not? Describe the main premise of the show or movie of its main characters. How did those from the dominant group respond to the movie or show in the past or present? And what can be done to change the stereotypical images and messages of racial and ethnic groups? The two concepts that I have used is racial identity, which can be seen in how my character that I chose, who is Virgil, or Static Shock, navigates being a black teenager, and systematic racism, which is reflected in the challenges Virgil faces in his community, including interactions with the general public and the community when he's not static. So basically, on systematic racism, if that's a little bit confusing, it's how he handles his day-to-day life when he's not a superhero. Now to talk about the actual show. The show that I have chose is called Static Shock, which is ranging around 2000 and 2004. That's when it was aired. Now the main character, Virgil Hawkins, his alias is Static Shock. He's from Dakota City, or in our world, Dakota. He is living in a family of three, which is his sister, father, and his mother died on active duty from being a firewoman. His best friend is Richie, or Richard Foley. I'll get into him later on in the PowerPoint. And his special ability or power is electromagnetism, which allows him to control anything on which allows him to control anything with its electromagnetic powers. And his affiliation is that in the show he's a solo hero, but later on in the future it's hinted that he's actually a future Justice League member. Is the show still considered progressive? Why or why not? What I chose is yes, it is still considered progressive. Why? Why is that though? The reason for this is that it tackled serious social issues, provided positive role models, especially for the marginalized communities, and it has used the superhero genre to offer a reflection of the real world concerns, making it both entertaining and educational for the adolescents and adults. Describe the main premise of the show or movie and its main characters. Now, the next slide, I will tell y'all about the main characters, but for now, I'll give you a brief description of what and the main premise of what the show is about. So, as we know, Virgil Hawkins, black teenage boy who becomes superhero static after gaining his electromagnetic powers. However, how did he gain his electromagnetic powers? He he was able to gain his powers due to an incident called the Big Bang in Dakota City. And the Big Bang happened after a whole gang fight war happened at a chemical plant, and somebody shot a gun at Virgil. It hit the plant, and then a big pink gas started to envelop the entire courtyard. Everybody there was infected, started to mutate. However, Virgil nearly escaped before he had mutated. The next morning, he started to feel a change. He started to feel his phone. He started to see that his phone had turned on, even though he didn't even charge it. His keys started to stick to him. The coins stuck to him like a magnet, like he was a magnet. And then as soon as he looked into the window, he started to see sparks all around his body. That had hinted that something had happened to him last night that caused this. He tested his friend Richie. They met up at a junkyard, and then as soon as Richie saw Virgil in the junkyard, he was hovering on a dumpster can, and that had signified that the Big Bang incident had gave Virgil Hawkins super light powers, or electromagnetism. The show deals with various of themes, including adolescence, friendship, family, and social issues, while also featuring superhero action and adventures. It is notable for exploring topics like gang violence, racism, discrimination. Many factors influence the ways which adolescents view themselves. Virgil navigates both his superhero responsibilities and his life as a young African American teen. Identities linked to the ethnicity or race can be developed based on your cultural background or specific experiences, resulting from self-perceived ethnic or racial group membership, or both. Now we're getting into the main characters and Static Shock's most notorious villains, which is one from the bottom left and the one in the middle. I'll get to why the one in the middle is the biggest one, and why the one to the down left is a tad bit smaller but bigger than the rest. As we know, we have the picture to the top. To the top, we have Virgil Hawkins, Static Shock. But then we see another figure to his left, which is Richard Foley, his best friend, who who is actually his superhero alias is Gear. The reason why he has powers or high intelligence is that after the Big Bang incident occurred and the next day, he was hanging Virgil was actually hanging around Richie. Virgil never Virgil never cleansed himself or washed off the the gas that was on him, which had got onto Richie and started to affect him. It didn't affect him until a couple episodes later on, but then he started to feel like he was changing as well. Not as much as it did the other Bang Babies or Bang Babies, which is that's what the villains are called, but it did give him some hint of superhuman abilities. Now, the one to the right is Robert Hawkins. That is Virgil's dad, his caretaker, his idol, the one who cared for him ever since his mother died in a fire. And at the bottom right, we have Sharon Hawkins, who's basically the typical black teenage black teenager sister who would always get on to Virgil, look after him, sometimes even pick at him. And now we're getting to the main notorious villains. Bottom left, we have Hot Streak, or David. Hot Streak is more or less to say Virgil's rival. The villain that mostly one of the villains that mostly appears in most episodes or seasons. Him and Virgil were actually fighting to see who would get to be in which gang. And it's because of Hot Streak that Virgil was even in that whole Big Bang incident in the first place, because he had called Virgil out for being a punk, and the gang that wanted Virgil to join them stepped up and helped them out. So it all resulted them in a huge fight. Now we're getting to the big one, Virgil's main concern, the one who tried to make Virgil's life uttermost disaster. Ebon. Ebon, not much to say going off of his name, but he's basically a shadow-like figure from the Big Bang incident. Now, out of all the Big Bang babies, him and Virgil got the powers that are most likely to cause the most destruction. Given that he has the ability to control, manipulate his own body to a shadow-like structure, and is able to do basically anything a shadow can do, which makes him pretty dangerous. The only person who's able to combat him is Static. Why? Because Static does have magicism, but it's because that he has light, which can also counteract shadow. Basically, the whole dilemma of light beating dark type deal. How did people of color respond to Static Shock in the past and present? In the past, they felt a source of pride actually. In the past, it was one of the few superhero shows featuring a black protagonist who was not relegated to a sidekick or some token character or even a background character. Virgil Hawkins was a fully developed character with relatable struggles, dreams, and flaws that represented black teenagers during that time. Just like any other superhero. Just like any other superhero that had its ups, downs, and flaws concerning their real identity, but with added dimension of navigating life as a young black person in an urban environment. In the present, its cultural significance, Static Shock is viewed fondly as a pioneering show in its terms of both superhero and representation, in its portrayal of young black characters. As discussion about diversity and representation in media have grown, Static Shock is often revisited as an early example of an inclusive superhero media. Critical race theory is the theory that I chose to correlate with my PowerPoint presentation. Now, the next slide after this, it'll be the episode that I chose specifically for this theory. The definition for critical race theory is that it examines how race and racism intersect with various social, legal, and cultural systems. Now, in the timeline that Virgil Hawkins is growing up in Dakota City, he deals with shortcomings being an young African American teen, especially those who feel wary of people of his ethnicity, like his best friend's father, who is racist. These systematic individual and interpersonal patterns continue partly due to the non-black people's experience with black Americans and reliance on social caricatures. Despite systematic challenges, black Americans are more diverse now than due to resilience. Now, the two pictures that I have up, and bottom to the right, it shows Virgil Hawkins eating with Richie's family. You can feel that there's some sort of a tense atmosphere. And at the bottom, you can see Virgil leaving his dinner as he feels the tension from his best friend's father. In episode 8 of Static Shock, Sons of Fathers, it highlights the importance of understanding diverse perspectives within communities of color. As you see in the top two pictures, you see Virgil Hawkins' father and Richie Foyley's father try and work together and come to an understanding when trying to find Mr. Foley's son, Richie. In the episode, it emphasizes the struggles within the black community. On the right picture specifically to the top, it shows that Virgil's father takes them to the back alleys of Dakota City, where most of the black community are. Richie Foley's father, Mr. Foley, makes a snarky comment of how why everybody here is living in the slums, or I never knew that this part of the city were here. And then Virgil Hawkins' father, Robert Hawkins, pointed out that I'm part of the government that helps out people like this, who's struggling to survive out here in these harsh times. I'm sure that, and not only that, your son helps me out in the community center with this. But Mr. Foley never knew about this. He never knew that his son was helping out with the less fortunate. As that shows that not only there's some miscommunication between Mr. Hawkins and Mr. Foyley, there's also some miscommunication between him and his son. Now, the bottom picture to the left, it shows that Static's communicating on his communicator with Richie, as Richie tells Static where exactly he is. Now, in the center picture, it shows Mr. Foyley hugging his son as they start to apologize to each other. Richie apologizes for running away, and then Mr. Foyley apologizing for not understanding his son and and for his racism. This had opened up for allowing Virgil and Richie's father to come to an understanding, and Richard Foley's father is able to apologize to Virgil. The episode Son of Fathers present a narrative that acknowledges the complexity and diversity of racial disparities between white and black people. How did those from the dominant group respond to static shock in the past? What can be done to change the stereotypical images and messages of racial ethnic groups? Responses from the dominant group varied, reflecting on the social attitudes about race and representation at the time. We have seen some people actually like the idea of switching up the protagonist from a white one to a black character. However, there were some that saw it as not as natural, and there were some even critiques on it. Basically, some were not used to seeing a black male protagonist hero in comparison to some of the most noticeable wide branded ones, like the Man of Steel Superman or the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Media creators can work to present characters from marginalized groups in complex ways that defy the oversimplified stereotypes. Instead of portraying black characters solely through the lens of victimhood, crime, or poverty, creators can develop characters who are diverse in their ambitions, strengths, weaknesses, and identities. Personally, I felt that Static Shock is one of the shows that laid the foundation for all of these movies and shows in the media corporation that have male protagonists centered around it. One of the most noticeable movies are two particular is Black Panther and Miles Morales Spider-Man. And then a show that mostly people in my generation are familiar with is The Boondocks, which is centered around a small black family in the suburbs. I would like to thank you for staying and listening to my PowerPoint presentation. Thank you, and have a blessed day.